Let's go. Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. As usual, if you can just confirm that everything's working from your end and you can hear everything, and that's it. So we do this every week, every Friday normally at 2:30 UK time. We had the payrolls an hour ago, so I'll talk about those a little bit. But what we do, the format for today, we look at the major markets, indices, gold, oil, a couple of cryptos, FX markets, that sort of stuff. So look at those, see what's been happening over the week and what to watch out for in the days ahead. And then I'll jump into the questions once I've done that. So if there's any stuff that you'd like looking at, put it in the question, put it in the chat box on YouTube, and we'll have a look at it. Just put it in once, so don't sort of spam it with lots. So we'll get around to them. And these things normally run for an hour. It's an interesting reaction. I don't know if it's interesting. Usual sort of volatile, bit of a headless chicken reaction to the payrolls. This is the Nasdaq 100. So the payrolls came out. Where was it? About here, somewhere. We've seen the market. So much better than expected. I think the market was expecting about 850, 870,000 jobs to be added in the US. And it came in at, was it 943, I think the number from memory? I can't remember, but it was better than expected. So we have seen a bit of volatility for markets, but overall, no real change, I suppose, from where we are, from where we were. Down a bit. The Nasdaq was down about 60 points at its worst point. It's bouncing back since then. I wonder if there's an opportunity there. But we'll come back to that in a sec. Let's just do the risk warning. First of all, this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investors lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Okay. Just a quick look at some of the events for next week. Inflation is clearly a hot topic for markets at the moment, with some thinking that perhaps the central banks aren't worried enough about inflation. I'd probably put myself in that camp, actually. They seem to be playing down inflation as temporary, perhaps though it ends up being more of a problem. But anyway, next week, Monday, China inflation in the early hours of the morning. That data comes out. Then Wednesday, US inflation data. That'll be interesting to watch, could cause some volatility. And Thursday, UK GDP. So how well or otherwise is the UK economy doing? So we'll find all that out next week. So it'll be an interesting week next week. Quick contacts thing before we jump into the markets. So to find out more about the platform and the broker, clearly I'm doing this with Capital.com today. So it's www.capital.com. You can open an account, open a demo account, download the app, all the usual. Find out more about me and trading ideas and the trading course that I launched a couple of months ago. Go to davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after today, feel free to drop me an email. My email address is david.jones@capital.com. I mean, clearly we can't do financial advice, but any general trading questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them. And for Twitter, follow me on Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets. And of course, follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. So you're watching on our YouTube channel now. We do these live streams every week. We also push out 3 market videos on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe, you'll be able to see those. I think, what did we do this week? I can't remember. I think the one we did yesterday was oil. Did a trade on that. We'll talk about that as well. I think oil's been really interesting. But we'll talk about that. And also in the description of today's stream, there's a link to our stocks channel. So we launched a stocks YouTube channel in the last couple of months. There is a video I did earlier today on Robinhood going up. So if you have a look at the stocks channel after that, there's a whole load of US stocks that we look at during the week. Right. Oh, look at that Nasdaq. Missed it. I was going to do the trade on that as well. Maybe it'll come back. I thought it was interesting. And let's start off with stock market indices. I mean, leaving the non-farm payrolls to one side, which is always just a bit of a crazy day. I thought I was really surprised when I looked at this today. The Nasdaq, if you've been watching these videos, these live streams for a while, you know that I say basically the same thing every week when we look at US indices. The trend is up, so for me as a trend follower, I want to be a buyer. And yesterday, the Nasdaq hit fresh all-time highs, continuing the trend. And I looked at the market sentiment data. I was quite taken aback. It was even higher than that this morning. When I looked this morning, 42% of clients who had a trade on the Nasdaq were short, which I think is outrageous in a market that's been going up. But it does, I think, illustrate. We talk about strategy and stuff on these live streams, and it does illustrate. I think why a lot of people lose money when trading. I think a big part of it is an inability to go with the trend in the market. We've got a market that's hit all-time highs yesterday, and there's nearly 50% of people who trade it with us are short. I looked on another broker's website, and about, I think, 70% was short. I thought it was really interesting to see such an extreme in a market that continues to go up. Anyway, here we are. We're on the Nasdaq, so let's start things off with the Nasdaq. So same thing I say every week. The trend is up. So for me, I'd want to be a buyer of dips. Clearly, nothing today is financial advice. I want to be a buyer of dips. There's our Nasdaq trend from the March 2020 lows. That trend line is coming in, where is it? Around 14,250, 14,200, something like that. I mean, for me, it would probably take weakness through at least 14,000 to suggest the trend in the Nasdaq was over. I think I do have a trade running from I think it's one of the biggest winners at the moment from the 8th of 8th of July. So bought the Nasdaq on the 8th of July at 14.6, and it's at 15,150 at the moment. So that trades up about £560. Just as an illustration, the trades in this account, these are trades that I do normally when we do these pre-recorded videos during the week. We do a trade. I was going to try and get a trade on today. I wonder if I've missed it. And the reason for me for the trade today was it got knocked back on the payrolls, got knocked back to here, which was also, if we jump back to yesterday, the lows from yesterday. So I thought that was an interesting opportunity down at 15,100 to be a buyer because it got knocked back to the lows of the day. So for me, anyway, the trend is still up. I think there's a lot of people who talk about this impending market crash. I see some of these comments on our YouTube channel and in other places and on Twitter. And I've been seeing them all year, about how the market is going to collapse. And for me, okay, no market goes up forever, but the trend in this market is clearly up. So for me, I'll be a buyer until we see signs of that trend changing. Let's have a quick look at the S&P, then we'll have a look at the European indices. So S&P 500, same thing, fresh all-time highs today. The S&P, here it goes. Even as we speak, it looks like it's pushing out to fresh all-time highs. Let's take a look on the 5-minute chart. There we go. So it's set it in the last 5 minutes or so. For some reason, my PC is set to GMT rather than British summertime, so it's an hour behind where I am at the moment. But that's the move. It is literally last 5 or 10 minutes. Fresh all-time highs once again in the S&P. So what can you do? So for me, as a trend follower, I'd want to be a buyer of any dips. And if we go back, and again, if we look at the big picture trend from, that's actually from November last year. But if we go back to March, I'd need to adjust that trend line. But you can see, whenever this market gets knocked back, it doesn't get knocked back for long. So again, for me, levels on the S&P to watch, I'd be watching this whole 4,100 to 4,200 area. If it's sold off through there, then perhaps we do have the trend reversing, but not at the moment, So still very strong, just going up all the time. What should we look at next? FTSE. I think even the FTSE 100, the UK index, has had a bit of a run. over the last few weeks. So it had fallen out of this trend into July, middle of July. But I think it was interesting that these old lows just about held, had a bit of a look below it, but overall was still pretty positive. And we've bounced back. I think the FTSE is always a bit of an odd one. You know, it has underperformed the US markets this year. But it'd be interesting to see what happens if we get a bit more strength from here, because you can see in June, 7.2 was a real problem for the FTSE. So let's see what happens over the next couple of weeks, but still broadly positive, not as strong, I would say, as the S&P, but you know, still strong and a great bounce back. For me, if the FTSE slipped below 6,800, then again, perhaps things are starting to change from a trend point of view. The DAX, the German market, let's have a quick look at that. DAX 30, here we go. So it has been a bit of a lagger over the last couple of months. It looks like, you know, it's got to move on this week. You know, perhaps today, if we see a bit more strength from here, we're going to take out those highs. What were those highs? 15,815. So it looks like it's about 15 points below the all-time highs. So perhaps we'll see what happens. See if we can get a breakout going in the DAX, but you know, still positive as well. And if we take a look finally at the Nikkei has been the real lagger this year, and that trend that we picked up on a while ago is still very much in place. I mean, 27,000 is providing something of a floor for the Nikkei. It has been the case since May of this year, so we're 2.5 months into that level holding. But you can see this correction that's been in place. You'd be pretty annoyed if you put all your money in the Nikkei in February and just seen it drifting while the S&P has been pushing out higher. So the Nikkei, you know, needs to break through for me this trend 29.2, something like that, to get a bit of a move on. So let's see what happens. But definitely a bit of a disappointing performer, that one. Let's take a look at oil and gold. I think oil's really. I did the trade. I did a video yesterday that went up on the channel yesterday on oil, and I bought it basically. It was. I think with the videos we do, the pre-recorded videos we do, I always try and do a trade, because I think it does make it more interesting if I do a trade when I'm talking about the market. And there are some trades that I'm less convinced of than others. But this oil trade yesterday, I was very convinced by that. So anyway, bought at 68.28 yesterday. And I thought it was interesting. It's been really interesting the last month or so for oil, because we've had this massive run up now from the April lows last year. You know, this great run. And the price had fallen out of the trend in the second half of July. But for me, just because the trend line breaks doesn't mean that the trend is necessarily over. You know, I'm always willing to give it a second chance and see what happens. And we had this weakness on, I think it was OPEC Plus agreeing to start raising production from August, first of all. Then we've had a bit more weakness this week. We had higher than expected inventories for oil, so the supply or the stockpiles in the US were higher than expected this week. What else did we have? I think the increase of the Delta variant of the coronavirus in places around the world, like China, and restrictions coming in place has sort of spooked oil. But I thought it was a great opportunity to buy in. So I bought in yesterday with the stop loss, I think the other side of these lows here. So for me, I would still be bullish on oil. We've lost some momentum over the last month. But for me, the bias is still up, you know, and I think it's only if it breaks below. I would say, first of all, what's that low? 64.90. So let's say if we saw a move below 64.90, then I would start to wonder if perhaps we were finally seeing the trend on oil turn, you know, but we've got big support down at 60 as well. So for me, I still fancy it for a pop back up to these early July highs around about $76. So we'll see how that one turns out. So it has fallen out the trend, but you know, it hasn't got massively clobbered. So I still think we'll see it perhaps recover during August. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at gold. I think we do. I know that gold is always a popular market on the channel, so we do fairly regular gold videos, and I always try and do a trade on gold. I think I think we did a video, I don't know, somewhere here, maybe earlier this week, and I put an order in at, I think it was at 17.95 on gold, and I'm guessing that has been filled as gold falls off the cliff. For my own trading, I haven't done a trade on gold for a few months now because I think it's a bit of a tricky market over the last few months. But I do still think that the bias is still up for gold, despite my losing position at the moment. So if I pick up on the moves in gold this year, something like that, when we saw this move in May of this year, I thought, well, okay, we're finally shaking off the correction. The market gets knocked back to 1750. Then we saw it rally back up to about 1830. So for me, I think this could be an interesting market to go into, to watch going into next week. And the level I would watch, so we're seeing this big sell-off today. Let's flip this over to perhaps a 4-hour chart and take a look at things. Look at that. It's absolutely plummeting today, isn't it? If we flip this over to, let's say for next week, so the level I would be watching next week, or even later to today, we did see on the way up, 1760, and these lows here, let's call it 1750, as being quite good support for gold. So for me, if I really had to do a trade on gold today, I'd be watching to see if we saw any strength coming in ahead of this 1750, 1760 level, and perhaps look to be a buyer. But perhaps it's one to sit on and see what happens next week. So for me, I would still be looking for some sort of recovery next week. I wouldn't be a buyer just yet because the thing is going down like an inverse rocket at the moment. But it'd be interesting to see if we see these old levels hold. But you can see if we take the chart out, it's been a bit sort of sideways and choppy. There've been some good moves in there. But if we looked at, since March of this year, and I think these were important lows made back there at 1680, 1675, 1680. It's been a little bit sideways since then, but I fancy a bounce going into next week, I think, just to put it on the line there. Let's take a look at silver. Silver, the most boring market of the year for me, silver. If we have a look at so it's getting absolutely clobbered again, and we've seen a big, we'll have a look at the dollar in a minute. I wonder if we're seeing some big US dollar strength going on at the moment. I mean, if you look at silver over the last 12 months, look at that. I mean, it's just sideways. And again, I know that a lot of people who watch our channel are big fans of silver, so we do always try and do a video on silver. And I do say, I just think it's a dull market to trade. For looking at that sort of time frame, it's gone nowhere in a year. This time last year, it punched up to 30. I think, was it a 7-year high or something like that in silver? And we saw gold hit all-time highs last year. But it really has gone just broadly sideways since then. A big range, big volatility from like 22 to 30, big swings, but no real direction. And again, we're seeing it getting hit hard today. For me, if I had to do a trade, again, I'd be looking to be a buyer because, whenever we see silver down at these levels this year, we've seen the buyers come back in. So maybe it's going to be an interesting week for silver next week. But for me, it's not a market I'm a fan of at the moment. I'd much rather be buying the dips in the Nasdaq than trying to call the shorter term swings in silver. But no market stays sideways forever. Perhaps at some point we'll see that change. I think if it drops below 21.5, we could see a really vicious sell-off in silver, but we're a long way away from there yet. Let's see. Let's have a look at this US dollar then, because I wonder, that's got to be the thing that's absolutely mullering, as someone put it in the chat, the price of gold and silver. Yeah. So the US dollar, this is the dollar index. So this is the US dollar against a basket of other currencies. Always a really interesting market to watch, the dollar index. And you can see this is a daily candle. So that's the move. That's the move today. So let's flip this over to a 5-minute chart and see the move. There's the move since the payrolls. So the payrolls were in here. Yeah. So we've seen a bit of a rocket put under the US dollar as a result of those payrolls. And that clearly has put pressure, one of the things putting pressure on gold and silver. Let's see what happens. But I think we've looked at the US dollar index quite a bit this year. And I do wonder, even though it has been, again, it's been a bit sideways, you could say, over the last 6-7 months or so. Have we seen something of a base? If we take this chart out, you can see that was the peak for the dollar in March of 2020, when it was seen as a safe haven, when the coronavirus pandemic really started to bite and start spreading around the world. Big sell-off then as everyone embraced risk again. But you can see that the moves we've seen in the dollar index this year, I just wonder, have we built a base down here? I think we did do a trade in one of the live streams on the dollar index. So let's see what happens. But that's one of the things that's putting pressure on gold and silver. So have a look at Bitcoin. A bit of excitement, wasn't it? Was it the other week on Bitcoin? This run. So we saw it the 20th of July. Trade down to 29,200. Then we had this run up to about 42,500 for Bitcoin. Massive move. And I think part of that was a rumor, since denied by Amazon, that they were going to start accepting cryptocurrencies. But we did see a big lift. I think it's maybe an interesting market to watch next week, Bitcoin. But the move so far, at least for me, hasn't really changed this range that we've been in. It's very exciting, and it's a big move. From 30,000 to 42 is what it's a 40% move, isn't it? I mean, that is a big old recovery in Bitcoin, but we're still trapped in this range. Yeah. But I think maybe it'd be interesting next week if we get a breakout through 42,500 for Bitcoin. Do we start to see something of a recovery? The flip side of that, of course, if you had to do a trade right now, what would I do? I'd probably go short. I go short at wherever we're trading now, 40,700 and something, with a stop loss the other side of 42.5, something like that. So I think it's really interesting market to watch next week, the cryptocurrencies, and see what happens there. So that's Bitcoin, and we're going to see, I'm guessing, a similar thing for Ethereum as well, similar sort of moves. So there we go. So again, Ethereum, since the big sell-off, has been pretty much capped by 2,900 to 3,000. Did have another push up to it yesterday, but another interesting one to watch going into next week. If it breaks above 3,000, breakout again, we could have the old FOMO, fear of missing out, comes into play. So I think that could be an interesting one to watch the cryptocurrencies going into next week. Right, let's take a look at some of the more traditional currencies. Start off with dollar yen. I missed the trade, I think, on dollar yen this week. And it's really, I thought it was interesting that if I readjust this trend line and we make it look, we'd had this really good run on dollar yen, and it sort of broke out the trend line, and I did wonder the move through 109. I think was it on Monday of this week? Was that like a false break? And the market has turned around really strongly. So I think for me, even though dollar yen has broken out of that uptrend, I do wonder if we're going to see perhaps a more gradual recovery. And so I do feel at the moment I've missed the opportunity there. But perhaps with dollar yen, we're seeing this dollar surge at the moment after the payrolls. Perhaps if things calm down a bit next week and it sells off and we get a retest near 109, that could be, I think, an interesting opportunity on dollar yen. But clearly a big jump today off the back of those payrolls. And if we have a look at pound against the dollar and euro against the US dollar, let's look at the pound first of all. I'm guessing we're going to see under a bit of pressure. You can see it's been a bit of a boring week for pound against the dollar. These again are daily candles. And look at this, just sideways all week. So again, what can you say? It's been a dull week. I suppose 140 was an issue in late June for pound against the dollar, and has run up to it again and started to roll over. So again, perhaps we're going to see a move down, maybe to 136, 137, but a fairly uneventful week for pound against the US dollar there. Let's take a look at euro, US dollar. Take a look at that one. There we go. That's getting hit as well. I think this might be an opportunity for the euro against the dollar going into next week. I think it might be an interesting market to watch because you can see how hard it's been hit. Down here we've got these lows, 117.50 lows from the third week of July, bigger lows back here from the end of March. So I think this whole 117 to 117.50 area, big support for the euro against the US dollar. So even though it's been hit a lot today, I wonder if we get something of a bounce happening next week. So I think for me that's perhaps an interesting market to watch going into next week. That's it. That's our usual markets done, isn't it? Let's just take a quick jump in to the questions. Let's have a look. Someone said, "Do you journal? Do you?" I guess that's, do I record my trades? If so, what info do you record? I think I do. I think it's really important, particularly if you're new to it, to record things like the reason you made a trade, and your entry point and your stop loss and your risk and your thinking behind the trade. I remember when I first started trading, I'd always print out a chart. Oh, there we go. This Nasdaq could be an opportunity. Print out a chart and say, well, and scribble on it the reasons I thought it was a good trade. So that was something I did very early on in the beginning. I think it's very important. Let's not forget most people lose. So I think if you can treat it sensibly and treat it like a business and take a look at what you're doing and the reasons why you're doing, you might pick up on a common theme on why you on why things aren't working out for you. So I think keeping records is really important. Right, we do a trade on the Nasdaq. You always like to try and do a trade in these things. So what was the low yesterday? The low yesterday was in here around 15,080. Let's say we go, I don't know, 15,060 for a trade. 15,050. Let's round it up. So we'll go 15,050, and I'll talk about the reason why in a minute. We normally risk about 100 quid on these trades, don't we, on the live streams? Let's buy it. Okay, so we bought that at 15,132. So I bought that. It's the reason I bought that. It's what I said at the beginning. I thought it was interesting that yesterday the Nasdaq hit fresh all-time highs, got knocked back, but has held above the lows from yesterday so far. So I thought it's an interesting trade. It's an interesting opportunity that the volatility might have given us. So that was the reason I thought I'd just do that trade in there. Right, let's get back into the questions. We looked at gold. Yeah, we did look at gold. Getting slammed, but interesting to see what happens around, still going down, around 1760, those sort of levels. Interesting to see what happens down there. But for me, I'd be standing aside for now to see if we do see those old lows provide some sort of support. Look at it, really. I mean, that is, what's it down since the payroll? It's about $40, isn't it? So it's about, it's only 2%, 2 and a bit percent, isn't it? But this is the zone I'd be watching down here. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we see the buyers come in. What happened to dollar Swiss? I'm guessing that is again just a dollar move. There we go. A dollar move off the back of the payrolls on dollar Swiss. There we go. That's what that looks like. Gold. We did gold. What's happening to precious metals? We looked at gold and silver. Okay. What else have we got? What markets are best for new traders to trade? It's a good question. I think that new traders probably end up trading the wrong markets, but I don't think there's a right or wrong market. But I think if people get sucked into, Robinhood's a good example, isn't it? Robinhood that floated a week ago, and then we had that massive move on day before yesterday. We haven't got that much data because, of course, they've only been trading for a week. But we had this massive move where it went. Here we go. It closed on Tuesday at 46.50, and then it touched $84 the next day. And I use this as an example of markets that are getting a lot of hype and a lot of coverage. And I think these sort of markets, they can be appealing because you see these big moves. But if you'd have bought Robinhood, in the first 15 minutes of trading on Wednesday, you're currently down about 30%. So for me, I tend to avoid, even now, I wouldn't trade something like Robinhood. I would avoid the more volatile, crazy markets, particularly if you're a new trader, and trade things that for me are perhaps a bit less volatility and clearer trends. But I think lots of new traders get sucked into whatever the market of the day is, whether it's Robinhood, whether it's GameStop, or something else that's going crazy. So I think don't trade the crazy stuff. I think it is what I would say, but that's just my opinion. What else? Bitcoin. We looked at Bitcoin. Is this the method you use in your own trading, or would you recommend to use more technical factors? I am very much a price-driven trader. I think I've been trading for a long time. I started trading in the mid-1990s myself, and I think back then, like a lot of people, just used loads and loads of indicators. And I think one of the problems is you end up focusing far too much on the indicator and not focusing on what the market is doing, on what price is doing. So for me, I'm very much a price and trend driven trader. Like that Nasdaq trade, I don't really care what the indicator's doing. I'm more interested in what's going on with the price for me. So and I think most people focus far too much on indicators. But more of that in my trading course, plug. How's your Amazon and crude oil trade going? Don't know. So crude oil was yesterday, is up a bit. So bought in at 68.28. That was okay. I think where is the Amazon trade? Losing money. Oh, did we do that 2 weeks ago, didn't we? Was it last week? We did that last week on the live stream. So bought at 33.68. The market's 33.49. Let's have a look at Amazon. So 33.68. Let's have a look at that. So we bought in, let's have a quick, so where was it? The 30th of July we bought in. It's not done much, is it? So we bought in here last week and it's been really dull. So yeah, it's pretty boring, that one. Platinum, I got stopped out of Platinum actually this week, a trade I had in Platinum, because it's broken down a bit and it's still going today. Because I did wonder, on Platinum, we had this great trend. Let's take a look at it. And for me, I think I bought with a stop the other side of 1,000 on Platinum, and it's fallen through it, so I'm out. And to me, it does look now that perhaps we are seeing that trend in Platinum from March of last year finally reversing. It's dropped a lot from the highs. 1,000 had been a big level for Platinum since December of last year, but as of today and yesterday, the market is moving to new lows for the year. So it looks pretty bearish for me, Platinum. We've got quite a bit of congestion back here from 815 through to 900. Be interesting to see what happens when it gets down there, but still pretty weak, I think, for me, Platinum at the moment. Chipotle Mexican Grill. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. I'm sure we looked at these other week, didn't we? Is it Chipotle? Who knows? Not me. There we go. I think we looked at these, and the trend is still strong, isn't it? It's a big breakout on those. Whenever it was, when did they break? Oh, I remember saying it's always difficult for me to know where would your stop go if you bought them. But so a breakout the third week of July, clearly strong, has continued moving higher. Again, the only question is, if I was a buyer now, what would I do with a stop loss? I think my internet connection is playing up a bit. Hold on a sec. Let's bring that back up. Where's it gone? There it is. So for me, if I was a buyer now, what's the closest you'd put your stop? If I was a buyer at 1888, perhaps the other side of 1800, the late July lows. I think it looks strong, doesn't it? What can you say? The thing is still going up. Right, Canbo. I've never heard of Canbo. Let's take a look at them. Canbo. We don't cover them, Canbo. So sorry about that. Do you ever set a take profit or only a stop loss? For me, it's a good question. Only ever a stop loss. So for me, I have a stop, and if the market moves enough in my favour, then I'll think about moving the stop. So I'll drag the stop loss up behind the market. But I don't have a target, really, when I do a trade and think I'll take profits here. Because I think one of the things I've definitely learned over the years, if we go back to the S&P, for example, markets can go up or down a lot further than you think they will. So for me, if we look at this stock market indices over the last year or so, who'd have thought we'd be here now, looking where we were in March of last year. So for me, I'm quite happy just to trail a stop loss up, or a take profit stop up as the market moves in my favour. So yeah. What do you think of BioNTech SE? I think I do remember those from last week. Let's have a quick look and see if we cover them. BioNTech SE. Wow. What do they do? I'm guessing some sort of biotech stuff. Does it say? Clinical stage biotech company focused on blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's have a look at them. I mean, that is a heck of a run, isn't it? That really is. It's gone from $200 in July to $425 beginning of August. It's a massive move. And now, I mean, again, the problem I would have is if we're going to buy in, where's the stop going to go? I think it's quite interesting. It's sold off a bit over the last couple of days. For me, I'd be waiting for a bit of strength if I wanted to be a buyer. But you could, if we were looking at the shorter term chart. Oh, I've just been stopped out of a silver trade. Look at that going through. So if I was looking at a shorter term, I told you I don't like silver. If we're looking at a shorter term chart since the middle of July, for me, the trend looks like that. So at the moment, it's trading around 379. If it pulls back to maybe 340, 320, it looks interesting. But I think, as I often say, I do have a problem trading these things that this is what doubled in about 3 weeks, this stock. So I think it's always great if you're in it, but I think it's always difficult if you're not, about picking a sensible entry point. So let's see. Platinum did platinum, did gold. Hang on a second. We did gold, copper. Yeah, let's have a look at copper actually. Let's bring that one up. Hold on a second. Because copper had a good trend, hadn't it? And I suppose, again, with the US dollar strength that we're seeing at the moment, it's come off a bit today. But copper, I mean, that trend in copper is still going, isn't it? So for me, I do have a trade on copper. If I didn't have a trade on, I'd happily be a buyer because that trend is up. So for me, if I was a buyer now, the absolute closest I'd have my stop would be probably the other side of this June low, about 410, something like that, which is only 5% away, roughly, from where the price is now. So I think that's what I'd be looking at on copper. So for me, it's only if it starts falling below 4 does it start to look as if that trend is over. Let's take a look at the Dow Jones. Someone's asked for the Dow Jones. We don't normally look at that. So let's take a look at that one, because I don't think that has moved the same way, or not quite anyway. Or maybe it is. I'll take that back. Actually, the Dow Jones, so again, today, the Dow is moving out to fresh all-time highs. So it's been a bit of a lagger versus the S&P and the Nasdaq, I think, over the last week or so. But the Dow as well, moving out to fresh all-time highs. So you have 3 indices, in the US, the S&P, the Nasdaq, the Dow, that are all, clearly slightly different underlying stocks that are all moving out to fresh all-time highs in the last 24 hours, which is pretty bullish, I think. Novax. Hang on a second. Is it Novavax or Novax? Let's have a look at it. Looks a bit boring, Novax or Novavax, doesn't it? It's just all a bit sideways and a bit scrappy, that one, if that's the one I was meant to be looking at. I don't know. What do you think? It's just a bit. I mean, since March of this year, it's been broadly directionless. I'd probably rather be a buyer rather than a seller at the moment. But I think it is just like a short-term trading the range sort of trade, isn't it? We've got 160 as being the floor, 260 is the top. The market's 189 at the moment. So perhaps I'll be waiting for a bit of strength and being a buyer and see if it swings back up to 240. But it's been a fairly directionless trend, I think, for me at the moment. Reality Income and Kinder Morgan. Let's have a look. Reality Income. There we go. So what do they do? Leading American real estate investment trust. It's interesting that, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting that it's perhaps one to watch for next week, because I mean, I would say it's a bit of a funny old trend, but I'd say that trend is still up, clearly. It's really struggled with the levels we're at now, 71 to 72. since April of this year. So are we going to get a breakout this week? So for me, if I wasn't in it, I would wait next week and see what happens if it breaks 72. You could also say, well, if I was in the position at the moment, I'd start to worry that perhaps it runs out of steam again. So if I was in the position at the moment with my stop loss, I think I'd have a fairly tight trailing stop loss behind it. But an interesting one to watch next week to see if it breaks through 72. And Kinder Morgan was the other one. Let's take a look at that. Kinder Morgan. What do they do? I should know. I do know that company. Large and famous energy infrastructure corporation. Let's have a look. Okay, that looks quite interesting actually. So we've had. Let's pick up on this trend. Let's have a quick look at it and think. We've got our trend had been something like that. So for me, the fact it's broken out of the trend line, I would still give it one last chance. So for me, if I had to do a trade on this one, I'd be a buyer now with a stop loss the other side of 16, let's say these old lows. So it has fallen out of the trend, but it was only not even a couple of months ago that we saw it make a high for this trend. And clearly, no market moves in a straight line. So I think it's interesting to watch it and see what happens. See if we get a bounce next week. So that sort of setup is one of the setups that I look for. So it's an interesting one, I think, for next week. Copper, we did copper. And I'm just getting a bit lost in some of these. Hold on a second. Someone here from the Philippines. Thanks for coming in. Gold, oil, did oil. So someone said oil is plummeting. Let's have a quick look at this, the plummet in oil. Let's have a look. Oh, it's not plummeting, is it? People do exaggerate when it comes to markets. There you go. So it dropped. Oh, actually, no. Do you know? I take that back. It did go from 69.80 to 68.60. So for me, I mean, like the Nasdaq trade, I would probably still be tempted if I hadn't done the trade yesterday to think about being a buyer in oil. So I think that's an interesting market to watch for the rest of the day. Oil, see if it can get back up to where it was, sort of around about $70. Let's see what happens. What else have we got? Silver short, Apple. Let's have a look at Apple. I think I did have a trade on Apple. I don't know if it's still going in here. An older one. Oh, there it is, from the 5th of March. So 5th of March bought 14 at 119.70. Where are they now? 146. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at Apple. Let's have a look on the daily charts. So for me, I mean, that's positive. It broke out. If we look at whenever it was, 15th of July, we had the breakout. We've not had much of a follow through since then. But the fact Apple, within the last, 3 weeks, has broken out to fresh all-time highs, that's positive. So if I had to do a trade now, again, the question would be, well, where would the stop go if we had to do a trade now? So for me, the really obvious place for the stop would be the other side of $140 for a short-term stop in Apple. But the fact it broke out, is is positive. Not pretty positive, it is positive. Just a quick reminder of where to go to find out more. Capital.com to find out more about the trading platform. You can open a demo account, download the app, all that sort of stuff. DavidJonesTrading.com to find out more about me and the training course. Any questions after this, david.jones@capital.com. And at Jones the Markets on Twitter. Follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. That's it, isn't it? And the link to the stock channel is in the description for this. There's a lot of people not happy about this fall in silver. Interesting. Silver. I think. I mean, I would suggest it is an extreme move, but in the great scheme of things, I think it's an important lesson in risk management. I think if someone's got too much of their account in one market, you need to think about managing risk better. And I'm not directing this at anybody in particular. But I do hear awful stories, over the years of people's accounts blowing up on one trade, and I think it's really poor risk management. One of the things, if you watch the pre-recorded videos we do, every time we do a trade for the pre-recorded stuff, and clearly they don't all end up winners, but the risk I do on every trade we do is only £250, and it's having a sensible level of risk where if any one trade goes wrong, you're never going to blow your account up. You're not going to double your account every month. But let's not forget, most people lose money, and a big reason why most people lose money is they take far too much risk on any one trading idea. So that's I'll leave that bit of preaching there and get back into the questions. What else? Okay, let's have a look. Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar. Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look on the dailies. I remember looking at this the other week actually and expecting a bounce, and the bounce has not come. I think it must have been about 105 maybe. It still looks pretty weak, doesn't it? So for me, I'd be doing nothing, but I suppose it is interesting down here. Aussie dollar, New Zealand dollar. Down at these old lows from, where was it? December last year, November, December last year. Are we going to see something of a turnaround? So it's an interesting market to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be doing anything at the moment. Personally, your view may be different, but I think it's quite interesting to watch down at sort of 104, 104.50. See if we see the buyers come back in. Right, what else have we got? A second. Coffee. Yeah, let's look at coffee. Coffee went absolutely nuts, didn't it? Did it go nuts? Yeah, it did. The other week. And I did trade it on the way up, and I think we traded it in this account as well, actually. And I'm wondering, because it went nuts for a couple, it was going up anyway, coffee. The trend for coffee was up. But then there'd been really bad drought, I think, in Brazil, in the growing regions for coffee. And that had been pushing the price higher. Then we had in July, temperatures dropped to zero briefly, again in the growing regions, and really affecting the crop. So, obviously it's pretty basic. If suddenly there's going to be a lack of supply, the price is going to go up. And the price, went from, if we have a look at it, the middle of July 150, touched 210. So we saw a 30% move in coffee. It's come off a lot since then. But I do wonder if perhaps we might see another move higher, perhaps not the same way we saw before. So for me, because the trend in coffee is still up, I don't have a trade on at the moment, but personally I am looking to be a buyer. The only question is it going to drop a bit more from here? So I think it's been a fairly quiet few days, as you can see, but I think it's another interesting market to watch going into next week. Let's have a look on the hourlies. The volatility is really, look at it, dropped off the last few days compared to what it had been. But let's see what happens next week on coffee. We looked at coffee. David Jones, BioNTech does not blah blah. Okay, whatever. Silver's gone. Novavax, looked at those. Natural gas, yeah, I've got a trade on natural gas at the moment. It's been a really good market for me. In that we got trade in here in natural gas as well. Over the last few weeks or so, or few months actually, it's been a great trend in natural gas, and trade it, and I always find it a bit of a scary market, natural gas, because it can seem quite illogical at times. But we've got this trend that's been going on this chart here since April of this year, from about 250, that sort of area. We're at 416, 420 at the moment, so it's a big move. For me, I'm still long. The trend is still up. If I didn't have a trade on now, I would probably wait to see if we get a bit of weakness. But we've got a lot of support going from 350 through to 380 on natural gas. So for me, that trend is still up. I'm just a bit worried. I think if we go back historically, it was that crazy move at the end of 2018 in natural gas that took it up near 5 and then reversed just as quickly. So I just get a bit wary up here, because we are at what had been historical highs for natural gas. It was the highs back at the end of 2016. but the trend is still up, so what can you do? For me, I'd perhaps rather wait for a bit of a shakeout and be a buyer on a big dip in gas, but that trend is still up. Lots of bearish divergence on the RSI, so I'm not really a fan of indicators, but I do pay attention to, what do I pay attention to? Divergence. So we've got the market going up and up and up, and the RSI is going down and down and down. So this can be a suggestion that perhaps the strength is running out of steam. But we do have, what are the trades we've got on natural gas at the moment? When were they done? Oh, here we go, 27th of July. So it was only a week and a bit ago, wasn't it? So buying in at 395, and that's up 215 quid so far. So maybe it's time to think about moving the stop on those, but that trend is still up. Nvidia, the chip manufacturer. I've been trying to buy a PC at the moment, just a desktop PC at home, and it won't come as a surprise. I mean, everyone is out of stock. You see ones that are in stock, and then if you don't buy it, 2 days later, they're gone because of this worldwide chip shortage. Of course, there's Nvidia, which I'm guessing they are the chip company, aren't they? Well, I'm talking about chips. Yes, there we go. Just making sure. I suppose, I don't know. I mean, for me, you'd have to argue, or I'd have to argue, that the broader trend is up. Okay, so that the broader trend from March 2020 is up. So I definitely want to be a buyer on dips. I suppose if you wanted to be aggressive from a short-term point of view, has their stock price been pumped up a bit too much? If you want to go short, you could go short now at 204 with a stop the other side of 210. Let's do that. Let's do that trade. We did one trade on the Nasdaq. Let's do a trade on Nvidia, taking the view that perhaps the strength has been overdone and we can get a sell-off back to 160. So what was the high? The high was 209 back there. Let's go 212 on a stop and we'll go short. So what are we doing? Stop loss 212. So we'll risk £100 again. So we're trading far too many there. So if I did 19, there you go, setting 19 at 204.60, stop at 212 up here. Let's see if we get a bit of a slide by Nvidia over the next couple of weeks or so. We'll come back and have a look at it. Biotech, right. Someone bought silver. Good luck with that. Let's see how that turns out. I do think that maybe, because you might have heard me get a few beeps going off, and I'm just getting alerts on, oh, silver's sold off so much. And I always wonder when you're getting messages from that maybe things have gone too far. But it'd be interesting. I mean, that really did absolutely nosedive, didn't it? It's lost $1 since the payrolls. An interesting market to watch next week, but as I say, not one of my favourites. Silver. I have an account with a UK regulated broker, and the broker heavily manipulated the price of oil. Because of that, I lost potential profit of approximately €25,000. What can we do about that? I would be surprised if the broker did actually manipulate the price of oil. I would check that. It would be a very strange thing, particularly, for the UK regulation is arguably the strongest regulation out there. So I would check that, first of all. But if you do think there's an issue, then clearly you could, speak to the broker, speak to the regulator. But I have heard, I've been doing this or variations on it for 25 years, and I always hear stories of the broker moved the market to get my stop loss, and actually it wasn't the case. I'm not saying that isn't the case for you, but for me, I've never had anything like that happen to me in the years it's been happening. But if you have an issue, then clearly there are, take it up with the broker. If the broker doesn't want to deal with it, then you can take it further. But I would just double check that, because manipulation is a strong word to use. So there you go. Is there extra risk in Friday afternoon trades? I don't think so. Personally, I don't think there are. I mean, some people would take the view that if we see the market or a market perform strongly on a Friday afternoon, it suggests perhaps we could see the strength continue into next week. I mean, clearly, you do have the risk of the weekend. You have 2 days when the market is closed. So actually, you could say, apart from crypto, you could say that there's more risk there, because stuff could happen over the weekend, and then markets gap one way or the other on a Sunday night. But for me, I don't think there's that much more risk, is what I would say personally, about Friday afternoon trades. But again, we all have our different ideas and tolerances of risk. Now let's have a look at Palladium. Actually, let's have a look at that. There's a lot of chat about silver today. It's almost like a silver stream in the chat today. Palladium, let's have a look on the dailies. And I think I do have a trade on Palladium. It's not doing much at the moment. For me, the trend is still up. It's a bit like that when we looked at copper. The trend for Palladium is still up. It's been something of an uneventful few weeks in Palladium, but the trend is still up. Support at 2.4 for me on Palladium, so I'm quite happy to stick with it. So that trend is still up, but a little bit boring. We looked at natural gas, coffee. Yeah, we looked at coffee nuts. Yeah, coffee beans. Tesla. Let's have a look at Tesla. Let's have a look at that. Tesla. I think Tesla is another one where the trend is still up on Tesla. I think I do have, in a second, a trade running. Oh yeah, from the 18th of May. So bought at 580 on the 18th of May in Tesla. So it's been perhaps a bit of a boring week for Tesla, but overall, I think our trend looks something like that. There you go. So for me, if I didn't have a trade on, I might prefer to sit on my hands and see if we get a dip back towards $600. But for me, that trend on Tesla is still going now. Right, I think we're going to wrap things up there. Apologies if I didn't manage to get round to your stuff. There was a lot of stuff coming through on the chat, and I think it was jumping around a bit, so I might have missed the odd one. But as I say, we'll do it all again next week. Any questions, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. You can follow me on Twitter @JonesTheMarkets. Go to Capital.com to find out more about the company. Open an account, open a demo account. The platform I've been using today is clearly allcapital.com. Follow Capital on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And I think that's it, isn't it? We'll see. Let's see. There's a lot to watch next week. I think it's going to be interesting next week, particularly with these precious metals, with gold and silver, to see what happens after, something of a rout today in these markets. We're seeing gold stabilise a bit over the last 20 minutes or so. So that'd be interesting to watch those next week. Personally, I think we'll still see something of a bounce, but let's see. This Nasdaq is not doing much after me buying in. Stock market's be interesting though, because all-time highs yesterday in the Nasdaq, today in the S&P, today in the Dow. I mean, that suggests it's quite a bullish finish for the week. So plenty to keep an eye on, and we will of course do it all again next week, 2:30 on Friday next week. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. And that's it, isn't it? Enjoy your weekend, and hopefully see you next week.